is the pulse of Africa, the heartbeat of its passion, the throb of its power, a power that can be sensed, but not as yet understood. African speaking to African, a language mysterious to the outside world. His thoughts, his fears, and his hopes are known only to himself. This is but one of the peoples of Africa, one of the tribes of the Congo. What was previously known as the Belgian Congo is a vast tract of land. Drained by the Great Congo River and its tributaries, this big country straddles the equator, rising from the coastal plains in the west to the heights of the Mitumba Range in the east. A land 20 times the size of Malaya, rich in its minerals and luxuriant in its crops. Until quite recently, little was known of the Congo or its people. Then explorers probed the hinterland and helped to colonize the tribes. The statue of one of them, Henry Morton Stanley, still looks out, as he must have looked out nearly 100 years ago, into the uncertain future. Over the course of the years, the Belgians established themselves in the Congo. They mined the copper and cobalt, tin and diamonds. They planted cotton and palm oil. They laid out an extensive system of water and rail communications to transport the produce. On the outskirts of the big towns live the Congolese people. 200 different tribes, 40 different languages. They lived in very much the same way as did their ancestors. Their livelihood was no better than their fellow tribesmen in the remote villages, eking out the same meager living. The only trade they could aspire to was the village market. There was primary education for those in the towns, but schools were designed to turn out only clerks and technicians for the lowest levels of government and industry. Very few Congolese were encouraged to study abroad. For about 70 years of Belgian occupation, there was not a single institution of higher learning built for the Congolese people. Little influenced by the outside world and contented with their own way of life, one of the few things which they have absorbed from their colonial masters is the nightclub or dance hall. 1960 has gone down into history as Africa's year of freedom. The 17 African countries became independent sovereign states. One of them is now known as the Republic of Congo. With the attainment of independence on June the 30th, the new Congolese Republic became a federal state. The Constitution provided for a Council of Ministers headed by a Prime Minister responsible to the House of Representatives and the Senate. Each province had its own government. Elected by a universal franchise, Joseph Kasavubu became the first president and Patrice Lumumba the Prime Minister of the Republic of Congo. On Victory Day, the Congolese National Army marched through the heart of the city, its first parade in honor of the war dead of 2 world wars. Today, the army is led by the Congolese themselves. Only a short while ago, there were no Congolese officers of any rank. Shortly after independence, the Congolese soldiers mutinied against their Belgian officers in a dispute over pay rise and ran riot. Ineffectiveness of the civil government led to breakdown of law and order. Congolese attacked Europeans. Tribesmen killed tribesmen. Men fought in the streets. There was looting and anarchy. People went in fear of life and limb. The Belgians fled the country in thousands. Administration came to a standstill. The world was shocked. A shaken Congolese government asked for United Nations aid. World opinion dictated that the United Nations should act immediately. Troops from member countries rushed in to restore law and order. Experts and technicians came to man installations and run the essential services that were abandoned by the fleeing Belgians. Today, the United Nations mission in the Congo is administered by Ambassador Rajeshwar Dayal, personal representative of the United Nations Secretary General. This is the greatest test so far for the World Organization. On its outcome may depend the peace of the whole world. Within a few months, 29 Afro-Asian countries had sent troops and military personnel to the Congo to help maintain peace and security in the troubled republic. Malaya responded to the call of the United Nations. A Malayan Special Force consisting of 613 officers and men arrived at Matadi on board 2 American vessels. In spite of many difficulties, they got to Leopoldville intact. There was a breakdown of the administrative and public services in Leopoldville. Industrial unrest threw the streets, docks and railways into desertion. Our troops left in 3 trains for the capital. At first, there was a derailment, but good fortune prevailed and no one was hurt. The second train got stranded at Lemait, a village 5 miles from the city, and our men had to continue their journey very much later. But the last trainload of our troops had the most trying time of the lot. There was at Matadi a strike by dock and railway workers. There were no cranes, and our men had to use recovery trucks to unload the heavy vehicles. Officers and men, stripped to the waist, labored side by side. Working round the clock and over the weekend, they cleared 260 tons of goods, excluding vehicles. Equipment unloaded and inventory checked, they were soon on their way to Ozone, their first transit camp. In a few days, they shifted to Shanik, a requisitioned naval dockyard 3 miles from Leopoldville. Here they set up a battalion headquarters and were ready in a matter of days for operational duties. The United Nations had originally intended to keep the Malayan force for 3 weeks training in Leopoldville, after which they were to proceed to South Kasai. It was felt their experience in jungle warfare would qualify them to put down tribal uprisings in that rich mining district. But, as events have shown, our troops stayed on in Leopoldville. The commanding officer of the Malayan Special Force, Lieutenant Colonel Unku Nasarudin, reported for duty to the UN Supreme Commander in the Congo, General Carl van Horn. After a short briefing on the situation in the Congo, the Supreme Commander assigned duties to the Malayan troops. He said he was sure that despite difficult conditions, our men would do a good job. At the Ndolo airstrip, about 3 miles from the city, the entire Malayan force went on parade. Foreign diplomats, representatives of the United Nations force, and Congolese dignitaries attended this formal presentation of the Malayan Special Force to the United Nations Supreme Commander in the Congo. The Supreme Commander, General Carl van Horn, took the salute. A United Nations blue beret bearing the regimental heckle and cap badges of the Royal Malay Regiment and Reconnaissance Corps was presented to the Supreme Commander as a token of goodwill. The dark blue heckle in the cap has become the symbol of all the Malayan troops in the Congo. General Carl van Horn handed a United Nations flag to Lieutenant Colonel Nasarudin, signifying that the Malayan force had formally come under United Nations command. He then inspected the parade. The bulk of our force, comes from the 4th Battalion, the Royal Malay Regiment. Formed in 1949, it has continuously been in action and has scored overwhelming victories against the terrorists. Here, in the cause of world peace, our men will further acquit themselves with valor and discretion. This is the first time our soldiers have gone overseas on an international mission. General Van Horn then inspected the officers and men of the reconnaissance squadron. Multiracial, it is itself an image of the United Nations force in the Congo. After inspection, a march past. This is the first time that the Federation flag, with the crescent moon, stars and stripes of Malaya, was proudly borne away before a public audience on Congolese soil. In the short time they have been in the Congo, our troops have been complimented for their discipline and smartness in parade and in the efficient performance of their duties. To mark this occasion, the Federation government made a gift to the Supreme Commander, a Malayan ivory kris specially delivered by air from Kuala Lumpur and now personally presented to the General.
Askar, Angkatan Khas Persekutuan Tanah Melayu.
Beginning his address with a few words in Malay, the Supreme Commander officially welcomed the Malayan Special Force to Congo. He said theirs was a difficult task. Those who one day beg you to protect them and their property do not hesitate the next day to accuse you falsely of inactivity, maltreatment, theft, and even capital crime. But fortunately, good discipline and an excellent morale has stood the test. Muster parade, and the troops are dispatched on their various assignments. Details go off on patrol duties. Ferret cars proceed to strategic positions. Guards are mounted at United Nations installations and essential services, and sometimes roadblocks. At the broadcasting house of Radio Leopoldville, the Malayans took over guard duties from the Ghanaians. The Malayans also provided security for United Nations dignitaries and Congolese leaders. A special duty was to protect Mr. Kasongo, the Speaker of Parliament, in his own house. And, the most important task of all, guarding the United Nations headquarters. At the United Nations Signals headquarters, Malayan signallers work side by side with men of the Royal Canadian Signal Squadron who are responsible for the entire communications in the country. This central control station has connections with the main headquarters of the United Nations and the provincial capitals of the Congolese Republic. There is a daily briefing for the United Nations liaison officers gathered from all the 6 continents. Here, technical experts from as far apart as Australasia and Europe meet together with officers of 30 contingents from Malaya and Indonesia to Ethiopia, Ghana, Morocco, Tunisia, Ireland and Sweden. Men of the United Nations mission in the Congo must at all times be kept informed and prepared. Headed by Dr. Stuart Linner is a huge United Nations technical aid program. The sudden withdrawal of Belgians left all the public services paralyzed, and to fill this vacuum came the men from many United Nations agencies. The public health services have been partly restored with the help of international medical experts and Red Cross workers. Hundreds of doctors have arrived. For the first time, 65 Congolese have left for medical training in Europe. Sick and homeless refugees are now being cared for and rehabilitated. Food and medical supplies have been distributed amongst the thousands of victims of tribal warfare in Kasai and Katanga. To relieve unemployment, public works have been initiated. A typical example is this undertaking in Leopoldville to reclaim an area of swampland near the Congo River. 2,000 workers are turning it into a vegetable garden and clearing one of the last Anopheles breeding grounds in the city limits. United Nations engineers and Congolese are working side by side. At the same time, civilian operations are finishing work on several important projects which were interrupted when the Belgians left. Vital communications are run by the United Nations civilian staff. At present, a complement of international personnel is working with Congolese technicians, assuring safe handling of air traffic throughout the country. The United Nations will continue to help the Congolese until they are fully trained to take over. Civilian operations will not be able to function effectively without the security provided by United Nations forces, for uncertainties still prevail. Under these circumstances, the Malayan Special Force has maintained a very high morale. A self-contained unit, the Malayan Force has its own medical post with a Malayan medical officer in attendance watching over the health of our men. Here, an enterprising soldier makes a few extra francs in his spare time, but like all soldiers, he has to wait for the next payday to collect his dues. Malayans at home are very concerned with the well-being of our troops overseas. Major newspaper companies send free copies of daily papers and periodicals so that our men will constantly keep in touch with events at home. Letters further strengthen the ties between our soldiers and their families, friends and sweethearts. The Malayan postal services have arranged special postage at very much reduced rates. Our men have little to complain of. They are as happy as men can be away from home. Fresh meat and local supplies are served as often as can be obtained. But sometimes it's mutton halal, over-salty canned meat. This is fast becoming the Malayan soldiers' traditional grouse. Muslims are brothers everywhere. Every Friday sees members of the Malayan Special Force and other United Nations troops join the local Muslims in prayer at the mosque. Life is not confined to camp and work. Parties and picnics in their leisure hours enable them to explore the pleasant countryside. Here at Ma Valley, outside the city, our men enjoy boating with a difference. You don't row, you pedal. Shopping is often a necessity, and sometimes a luxury. But bargaining has more scope on the pavement. There is a wide choice of souvenirs. Back in camp, it's like home. Introduced by our boys, Sepak Raga is catching on with the local populace. Men off duty find that there's lots to do, each according to his own taste or desire, until lights out. But But vigilance must always be kept. Those on duty go out for the night watch. Once in a while, the camp comes to life when local artists put on shows of their own cultural significance. Dancing is an inherent part of the life of the Congolese people. This dance represents the processes during their lifetime of struggle and death, castration, lamentation, and eventually resurrection. Our troops are popular with the local people, and here the Congo Queen of 1960 and her sister dance for them. The Malayan Special Force is making a major contribution to the United Nations operation in the Congo. For already half a year, our men have helped to preserve peace and protect life and property in the strife-torn country. They have won a reputation second to none for their courage and discipline, their smartness and devotion to duty. Under the most trying conditions, they have acted calmly and adhered to the rules of human justice and dignity. Never have they interfered with the internal affairs of the Congolese people. Malaya has deep faith in the United Nations and has given unstinted support for the UN mission in the Congo. The Federation government has just sent reinforcements to bring our contingent to brigade strength. This is decisive, and other member nations have rallied at once to the urgency of the Congo mission. With a more effective UN force and greater cooperation among member nations, there is now hope that peace will soon be restored and economic and social life reinstated in the Republic of Congo. Until then, the Malayan soldier will stand fast to uphold the will of the United Nations.